Right, reframing the story and reclaiming the agenda. Thanks, Helen. The LCA has got itself bombed and can't find a tow truck. Previously, the church was making quite good progress, humming along the highway with tailwind, pushing it along at a great pace. After more than a decade debating the ordination of women, the CTICR went to the General Pastors Conference, the General Convention, in the year 2000, with a proposal that the Bible and the theology of the church permit women's ordination in the LCA. Way back in 2000, the Theology Commission, the College of Presidents, the GCC, all agreed and put this proposal on the table. Over half the church voted for it. Amazing result, but not the required 2/3. But then, of course, the proverbial hit the fan. Oh no, women's ordination looks perilously close. Something needs to be done. Surely there's some side tracks that can be taken so that this car gets well and truly bogged. I don't wish to rehearse the history of the debate stretching back to 1985. One of the documents in your folders gives some of the highlights of that long and twisted and tortuous road. The two episodes or events I think are particularly pertinent, significant, typical, each one, of other things that have happened in the history of this debate. One was in 2004, the other was last year. The 2004 one is indicated by the sheet I handed out before. I didn't hand it out, I guess. A pile of them on the table, each one at your table. So you might like to take one of those now. I think that those... I haven't all got one. Peter Lockwood got some. I think that those who were not so keen on the ordination of women, to put it lightly, produced this paper. I guess it was a paper of the CTICR in 2004 called Controverted Matters in the LCA Debate on the Ordination of Women. There were, as you can see there, 5 headings to it, and under the headings of exegesis and hermeneutics and theology and history and practical issues. And there were 17, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, 17 items that were unresolved, that were controverted. One side said this and the other side said that. And let's just have a look very, very quickly at one of those, which is the theology one, which is on the first page, right towards the bottom. We agree and we disagree. We agree that by his word Christ has instituted certain acts such as the preaching of the word and the administration of the sacraments. We disagree on whether his institution of the apostolic ministry authorises men to exercise it, and whether ordination of women is an adiaphoron, that is something that's been neither forbidden nor commanded in the Bible. 17 like statements under these 5 headings were proposed for the consideration of the church. The pastor thought this was wonderful. Somebody had come out with a kind of an agreed statement, an agreed agreement that we disagree fundamentally. That we disagree fundamentally, one side or the other. I think it was rather, if one had a cynical mind, one would think that, that it was deliberate. At this, thanks Helen, God suffered a major bout of claustrophobia. That's the God box. God wanted to get out, I think. The paper, as you can see, it's a chainsaw. Struggled to get out of this sort of bind that the church, God, had found itself in. The paper concluded with a set of appendices that ruled certain questions out of the discussion. They are to do, as you can see, with things such as the servant nature of ministry, the appeal to women's gifts for ministry, the matter of the mission of the church. Those matters shouldn't be included in the conversation, even the cultural conditioning of texts. All of those matters were not to be discussed. You can sort of see that the paper came very much from the side of those who were opposed. Virtually create an impasse, a log jam in the discussion, because you know that this side's not going to give way, that side's not going to give way. You have an absolute impasse. Later on, it was said that what we need is a fresh set of hands on the wheel. We need to take a longer run up. No, it's not a matter of finding a way round the bog. We'll charge straight back in once again. And start from scratch. See if the car can get through this time. So 5 pairs of hands on the wheel are all that's needed. It was a mess last time round, with everybody wanting to have their say in the church. Too many cooks spoil the broth, if you can change the metaphor. Thanks, Don. And so the church is floundering, hoping to get himself out of the mess by starting from scratch, or even behind scratch, with a new group of 5 pastors given the task of achieving consensus on the topic. Their starting point, last year's hermeneutics conference up in Tanunda in October of last year. We outsourced our theology. We don't have the competence within the LCA to do it. We gave it to 6 people from overseas. Finally got 6 together, 4 were against, 2 were for the ordination of women. As it turned out, I think that was accidental. I think the President was hoping to be more evenly split. And one of those who was very much in for was supposedly a feminist from the ELCA. She actually gave the best, clearest, simplest, most wonderful presentation of the gospel, the Lutheran position on the ministry of all of those. As a church, we used to say that the way to get ourselves out of problems, to solve difficult issues in the church, was to settle the matter of biblical authority. And when we're clear on that, we'll be able to reach consensus on controversial topics. These days we're far more sophisticated. Now we say, let's sort out the hermeneutics, a bigger word, more difficult word. And then the answer to all difficult topics in the church will be able to be settled. What you do is you feed all of the biblical and the historical and the pastoral data into a U-Butte Lutheran hermeneutical computing device, and it will spit out the God-pleasing answer at the other end. When I hear that, I want to cry out, what's not to know about some of the fundamental principles of hermeneutics? Is it not known? Isn't it known in the church? The prior assumptions and convictions largely determine the decisions that people take about theological matters. Isn't it known that all of us are biased by our background, our culture, our peers, our teachers, our emotions, and our life experiences? We have to admit that we have been shaped in a way that has led us to support the ordination of women. Is it not known that people ignore or distort or minimise the significance of texts or opinions that don't support their views on a given topic, and make great play and build up to the nth degree whatever you can lay your hands on to support your own convictions? That's us. It's them. It's all of us. And don't we know that people, ourselves included, feel threatened and disturbed when our underlying assumptions and ideas are questioned? Isn't it known how we notice and look for that which confirms all our beliefs and ignore, undervalue, or even distort that which contradicts them? Is it not known how much loss is experienced when one contemplates moving from this worldview to another worldview? People will do anything at all to avoid the pain of undergoing major shifts in their worldview, moving from one paradigm to another. I find it virtually impossible for me to change my mind because of who I am, the way I've been formed, the way I think. As true as that is, there is a paradigm, or a meta-narrative, or a grand, all-encompassing story that we shall be proud to rehearse and proclaim and sing and shout from the rooftops. It's a song that Lutherans have sung from the time of the Reformation. We need to tell the Lutheran story once more in terms that are clear, simple, and unequivocal. I'd like to give a broad outline of the story that we need to be telling about women's ordination from a Lutheran perspective. It's quite straightforward. And so, reframing the story, number 12. We need to push and push the thing that forms the essential DNA of Lutherans. That's the gospel. The public ministry of the church is nothing more and nothing less than the ministry of the gospel. The Lutheran understanding of ministry, in Augsburg Confession number 5, Article 5, is that the ministry has been instituted by God to provide the gospel to the people of the church through the preaching of the word and the administration of the sacraments. The gospel of God's grace in Jesus Christ is the church's comfort, its joy, and its courage. And that's what the ministry is about. The church has two identifying marks, the word and the sacraments. At the year 2000 Pastors' Conference held at Concordia College, Rolf Mayer, sitting right here, made this point loud and clear. The church has only two marks that set it apart as church: the word, gospel, and the sacraments. A third, as soon as one introduces a third element, that the clergy must be male, is to introduce a legalistic requirement that undermines and finally totally destroys the gospel. So first and foremost, our story as Lutherans about the church's ministry is that it's all about the gospel. The second thing we need to push and promote is the matter of justice. We're told that it's not a matter of justice. The moment that it dawns on us, however, that the ministry is about the gospel and not about gender, and we know of women who feel the call to ministry but can't follow the call, it becomes a matter of justice, and we can't stand idly by and let the injustice continue. It's agreed by all of us, I hope, surely, that the ministry isn't about human rights, it's about God's call to the ministry. But if people are denied the opportunity to test their call to the ministry, we have to conclude that it is nothing but a matter of the denial of rights. So yes, the ordination of women does at this point become a matter of basic justice. Third item that needs to be promoted and pushed is the mission of the church in the face of the claim that the church must always be seen to be countercultural, and so we pride ourselves that we exclude women, for example. We hear that claim constantly. I would counter by saying that Paul was extremely sensitive to the culture of his day, and we have to be too. In the early church, women were involved in all levels of ministry, if you read the big article that's in your folders, but there were some whose participation in worship was both unruly and culturally inappropriate, and it called the standing of their husbands in the community into question. It's a matter of shame. Paul told them to leave your questions and interjections till you get home. He wasn't speaking to the women prophets and apostles and his female male associates in the ministry of the gospel that he refers to elsewhere. And rather than being countercultural, Paul said that he wanted to become all things to all people so that by all means he could save some. And what doesn't that mean for us in our communities today? Hardly the statement of a person wishing to stand apart from the culture of his day. Today's society doesn't tolerate an organisation that is so anti-cultural as to deny equal opportunities to women. It's hard enough for us baby boomers. It's impossible for Gen X and Gen Y. Why is it all so wrong to be all things to all people for the sake of the gospel? The all-male clergy that we've known from time immemorial is like so many church traditions, well and good, while it was socially unacceptable for women to take positions of leadership in the wider society. But the time comes when attitudes change and the church no longer felt obliged to observe practices that were once regarded as well and good. The confessions even speak in those terms, that certain things was continued to be maintained for the time being and to avoid offence. Article 28 of the Augsburg Confession. You maintain certain practices for the time and to avoid offence. Nowadays, for the time being has become the time that's been and gone. And offence is definitely not avoided by closing the doors of the ordained ministry to women, quite the contrary. The longer we persist with our model of an all-male clergy, the more irrelevant we are to our children and the broader community, and the more the mission of the church continues to suffer. So the fourth item in a good Lutheran statement about the ministry exists for the sake of the mission of the church. An offence to those we seek to win to the gospel, the message of the gospel is to be avoided at all costs. And the fourth item, very briefly, that needs to be shouted from the housetops is that women bring unique gifts to the ministry that complement those of men. The ministry of the LCA would undergo a dramatic change in so many areas, all for the good, if women were included. Stories could be multiplied, and they are being multiplied in our midst. Next, number 13, reclaiming the agenda. This is the point we're moving to at the conference. It's time for action, isn't it? Planning ahead, realising there's another general convention next year here in Adelaide. I have some preliminary suggestions, practical tips that we could perhaps take up as parishes, as an entity, or we become an entity over these past 2 days. There's interested groups within parishes, there's individuals, who knows. How many good ideas haven't already surfaced and aren't yet to surface this afternoon? Vic's spoken about the movement of the laity. Monica spoke about vigils. We've heard Tanya suggesting on one Sunday a collective activity of the church, a movement of the church, and so forth. Listening to the voices of women. We should seek regular reports from this task force that's been put together so we know what they're doing, what initiatives that they're suggesting, because they're supposed to be feeling the pulse of the church. Not simply from those content with well-established traditions, but also with those who have become disillusioned, those who have left the church in the next generation. We need to be seeking output from them so we know where they're going, what they're heading, what they're thinking, what plans they might have. We should push for the reintroduction of the biblical and theological and pastoral discussion on women's ordination and the justice discussion at all levels of the church. At a time when the church is divided on the topic, one gets a distinct impression that the church is burying its head in the sand, whereas pastoral wisdom would suggest that this is the time of all times in the church, when the leaders of the church should be out there pastoring to the people and doing those things which are necessary to resolve the issue that is before us. It's like the elephant in the room all the time. The debate should be conducted at the general conventions of the church, not only after approval is forthcoming from the pastors. That was actually resolved at the 2009 convention in Melbourne, when a proposal from the previous consensus task force resolved 14, had 14 recommendations, one of which was that resolutions could only come before the floor of this matter on women's ordination, could only come before the floor of the Senate if it were previously passed by a 2/3 majority of the General Pastors' Conference. It was lost. That proposal was lost on the floor of the Melbourne Convention. We haven't heard a word. It's in the book of minutes, but we haven't heard a word of that from the leadership of the church. Above all, I think, the LCA needs a totally new paradigm for understanding itself as church, and that of diversity in practice within the unity of the church. Church disunity is anathema to Lutherans. The unity of the church belongs to the confession of the church. We've seen that given the impasse that the church has reached and the unlikelihood of a breakthrough in the near future, the insistence on unity of practice on the matter of women's ordination is extremely counterproductive in our church and has within it the very seeds of division, I think. So rigidly held together to that which is really fractured so seriously. The ordering of the ministry is not some kind of high-level doctrine, including ordering it according to gender, one gender, or even both. It is an adiaphora, an atom neither commanded in the Bible nor forbidden, and therefore it shouldn't ever rank so highly as to require a 2/3 majority to become the practice of the church. This strange bogged car we call the LCA is still our car, our vehicle, our church, and our mother. That's the way I regard it, born and bred, I guess. We need to reclaim it for the people of the church, for the women of the church, for the next generation of the church, for a more expansive and inclusive view of what it means to be church. We need to rebadge the LCA as the church of the gospel, the church that is truly Lutheran in the best sense of the word Lutheran. And we too, the people of the church, need to take our proper place behind the wheel so that we can steer the vehicle out of the bog and back onto the main highway and set out on the journey once more with the wind at our backs.